Hello and welcome back to the Palace Way podcast. This is definitely an emergency podcast for a couple of reasons. We've got a lot of transfers to talk about, we've got the cast ruling, but most importantly, to start with the positive, Crystal Palace have another trophy in their trophy cabinet. We've won the Community Shield, and I could not be any happier about it. And today, joining me is the wonderful journalist Bobby Manzi. Bobby, how are you doing?
I'm quite well, thank you. Apart from everything going on with Crystal Palace and the hectic nature of that, I'm currently on holiday, as you'll notice by the background. I'm currently sat on a balcony in Spain. So yeah, just trying to get some rest. I'm a little bit out of the loop on the terms of Palace, only by a couple of days. I've been trying to leave my phone alone, but every now and then I do pick it up and take a couple of phone calls or send a couple of texts. It's an addiction at this point.
The hardest working man in Palace business, I think, is the phrase that
I'm
we.
glad you didn't say sports journalism because there's a lot of people who work a hell of a lot harder than me.
There are some people who do not have, personal lives working in sports journalism. The amount of tweets that go out and screen time I've seen of people like Fabrizio Romano is just insane.
Honestly, too. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy, I think he's spoken about it quite publicly on some podcasts he does. He's missed so many family events for transfer news or journalism. It's quite impressive. I mean, I've been sat on the beach today on my phone trying to find out the latest on Mark and Ebereche, but not as addicted as them. I managed to have 3 hours in the beach bar without my phone. I left that with the rest of the family to deal with, and then went and spent some time with some friends in the bar.
Well, we'll get onto the transfers in due course, but let's just start by debriefing the Community Shield because it was just one of the best days of my life. I know you were there as well. Like I cannot even put into words for me personally to see Palace lift a trophy with my dad next to me, who wasn't able to come to the FA Cup final, so that was just beautiful. It was a astounding performance. I thought we started rough. I didn't get to see it. I was trapped outside, thanks to Wembley. But so we actually won in 80 minutes that I saw. But I thought we played really, really well, especially in that second half. Glasner kind of took advantage of the substitutions that Liverpool made. I thought we were on the front foot for the majority of that second half. I mean, our XG exceeded theirs massively. And how about that for a first penalty shootout won in 21 years?
Yeah, well, XG was slightly inflated by a penalty, which is 0.71 or something around there. But yeah, the day at Wembley was very special. Wembley again, a trophy again, a for Crystal Palace. I mean, what a day it was. I was in the press box, but with my Palace hat on, I enjoyed pretty much every moment. I think ultimately, Palace went 1-0 down with Liverpool's first chance of the game, and after that, I thought they responded very, very well. I thought the best side for large portions of the game. Liverpool's to go 2-1 up probably came against the run of play. It was quite a spooky moment, really, scoring in the 20th minute with an effort like that. It should never have ended up in the back of the net. It was almost like Diego Jota was looking down on that moment, and I was quite moved by that at the time. But after that, again, Palace responded brilliantly, and the second half were by far the better side. I mean, the attacking football was exceptional, and actually managed to neutralise that Liverpool threat that was so prominent in the first half. Their firepower, I mean, that's going to be one to watch this season, Liverpool. I think they're very much in the title race. They just need to be able to deal they need to be able to deal with teams who play high lines like Palace and sorry, when with where they play such a high line, they need to be able to deal with teams in transition like Palace. So Palace probably a perfect test for Liverpool, but this is not a Liverpool podcast, so let's not go into that. I
Yeah,
just thought going forward, I thought Palace looked very, very promising. A couple of times they made the wrong decision, whether that was just in front of goal or getting that final ball. But there was so much space in behind for Palace to exploit. And I think that's a real promising sign, no matter how many players leave or not this summer, going into the season. And yes, it's another trophy. It was what a moment for Justin Devenny in the penalty shootout. It's great to see someone I know he was brought into the football club rather than nurtured fully through the academy. But it's great for someone to have spent time within the academy and then come into the senior picture. Probably someone who was never expected to come into the senior picture. And I think Justin would be the first person to admit that. You know, he probably. I know you and I have spoken privately quite a lot about the academy players, and he was probably the most ready for senior football, but never at the Palace level of the Premier League. Yeah, he's come in and he just always makes an impact, whether it's that 20 minutes at the end or whether it's a game he starts in. And what a great penalty it was straight into the top corner.
it's genuinely a ridiculously good penalty. It's in that circumstance by that player. I woke up the morning of the FA Cup final and I said, I want Justin Devenny to win it in 95. Didn't get it then. Very nearly got it. Literally on the dot at the end of the full time before we went into penalties. And once Sosa missed his, I was like, it's either going to be Hughes or Justin. And when Justin stepped up, I kind of just knew he was scoring. So such a good moment for him. An incredibly satisfying moment for me to get everything I wanted between that and the boom from Mateta at Wembley as well. But
Finally,
yeah.
finally, the better boom at Wembley. See, there were so many great moments on Sunday.
It's just so needed in light of everything. It's been a really difficult summer for Palace fans, whether it's sort of general hesitancy in the transfer market on both incomings and outgoings, and obviously the CAS ruling and UEFA decision as well, which has now left us in such a difficult position.
And I think it was, well, 90 minutes or just over 90 minutes with a penalty shootout, where actually we were just able to forget about everything that had been perhaps overshadowing Crystal Palace's massive triumphs this summer. It was just great to be back to football, great to be back to sporting merit. And Crystal Palace winning another trophy. I mean, I can't believe that is actually a sentence we are able to say. It was just quite impeccable. And now we look forward to the season. Yes, there's been transfers. Yes, there's been CAS and all of that kind of stuff. But lick your wounds on the transfers and CAS and move on and let's go and give the season a big crack with Oliver Glasner because it could very well be our last with Oliver Glasner.
Yeah, I mean it's a massive opportunity for the club. We've broken through what we thought was our glass ceiling in both European football and winning a trophy. We have the strongest first 11 I think we've ever had in our club's history, the best manager. We're in a really good place in terms of PSR. There is, an opportunity for Palace to push on here, but I think it's clear that we've had a summer hindered by the you know decisions made above our pay grade for the most part with UEFA and CAS. So let's just get into that, just so that people can kind of understand what does this actually mean? Why has it impacted us so much? Why did we invest so much time in fighting this decision? Obviously, you've got the principle of being demoted in our view unfairly on account of John Textor not having what Palace deemed decisive influence, even if UEFA deemed it a different way. And CAS took the line with them based off their definition, whether or not it was explicitly stated or not. In our view, no. But at the end of the day, we've lost in court. So you know, what are going to be the long-term effects? What are we missing out on by being demoted from the Europa League to the Conference League?
Well, there's as big as a £20 million gap between the Europa League and the Conference League, so that's a good starting point to just discuss the impact of what this means to Crystal Palace Football Club. It's a significant financial loss for the club, and that's very disappointing in that aspect. Also, it's just a more prestigious competition. Palace rightfully earned on sporting merit to be playing in the Europa League. They should be playing in the Europa League. Lyon or Crystal Palace are not owned by the same entity. John Textor has never had decisive influence at Crystal Palace. He's never been the one making the decision. He's not even in every board meeting. It's a completely and utterly ludicrous decision. I think Palace's club statement saying that sporting merit had been rendered meaningless by basically a decision taken by men in suits hits the nail on the head. It's a very sad day for football. It's a very sad day for Crystal Palace Football Club as a whole. And I just find myself quite disappointed by the decision. I think we all kind of expected it to go this way, but nonetheless, I think it's quite frustrating. And Palace have every right to be aggrieved. I think their arguments were very fair at CAS. They had over 10 hours or near enough 10 hours discussing and for something that Palace, as they say in their club statement, they didn't think really they were given the fair trial because the outcome was predetermined.
There's merit in the argument that a club like Palace is not being treated the same way bigger clubs are. If you look at City and Girona or United and Nice, so on and so forth. But that's over. What can we do? We're now, losing out on the pool of the Europa League. We're going to have to do it the hard way, having already thought we'd done it the hard way to get into the Europa League, right? Like, it's an unbelievably unfortunate situation, but we now have to move on and basically stack our squad as good as we can for our first ever European campaign with the best manager we've ever had. So I think that's honestly just a good chance to move swiftly into the transfer situation of the squad and where that's kind of looking. Obviously, there's been a lot of news today, especially concerning Mark Guehi and Eberechi Eze. In terms of Eze, you've got Spurs edging Arsenal at the moment in terms of interest and pursuing that player. James Maddison's done his ACL, so that's the reason for that. But neither club seems particularly, at least in reports, interested in paying the full release clause, which is, I think, a hard line for us until that expires on Friday. And in the case of Mark, Liverpool coming in finally at a reported, 35 million thing, I think, according to Paul Joyce. And you've got this strange kind of situation where, we could have sold them or would have liked to sell them earlier in the window if we could, because you have more time to sign a replacement. But now we're in a position where we've done a full preseason, the squad's gelled, we've won a trophy. Do you really want to be selling your captain right now with 2 weeks left in the window? And, I guess you've got conflicting aims as well, because you have a manager who wants to build the strongest squad possible, but maybe that's not financially possible without selling these players. So it's a difficult and complex situation that we're in.
Yeah, well, Mark has a decision to make, right? It's whether he wants to see out the final year of his contract at a club where he knows he'll be playing football every week in a World Cup year and almost, as long as his performances back that up, guarantee yourself as England starting centre back, or take the risk to go to Liverpool and not play football every week, and maybe have Thomas Tuchel choose someone else to play in that role over him come the 26 World Cup. Next summer he can leave on a free. So if he wants to play that regular football, then take the big signing on bonus next summer wherever he goes. Kind of makes sense for him as a business decision. For Crystal Palace, the business decision, however, is to sell Mark Guehi. Steve Parish made no secret of that when we all interviewed him in the mix zone after the game on Sunday at Wembley. Crystal Palace need to sell Mark Guehi. You can't sign a player for £25 million and lose him for free of his caliber. He's a £70 million player. So essentially, you're looking at a £45 million, well, a £45 million profit turning into a £20 million loss. It's nonsensical as a business decision. So there is a world where Crystal Palace do need to sell Mark Guehi, or they need him signing a contract. They need some kind of resolution. Running his contract down is not an option for Palace. But equally, Palace can't turn around and say to Mark, "We're not going to play you if you don't move," because Mark knows they will end up playing him because of the style of manager Oliver is, and Oliver wants him to remain at the football club. So they're in a really, really difficult and precarious position with Mark.
I,
It's one we're still trying to see how it moves. It sounds like, and I am slightly out of the loop, but the very small conversations I have, and I haven't been able to double source anything, so I can't run it as such. But from the few conversations I have, it sounds like Liverpool have some kind of outline with Palace about what a deal would look like. And on Eberechi, well, I don't know if Tottenham have the money to spend on Eberechi as a up front. So maybe there's going to have to be some conversations there to see how that looks. But for Palace's financial problems that they're in at the moment, or I say financial problems, that the fact they have a lack of a big budget when they're selling players of this caliber, they need as much as possible up front so they can go and action that in the market without having to go to banks like they did with Aaron Wan-Bissaka a few years ago to take advances on instalments and then have those instalments inevitably paid to the bank with a bit of interest. So Palace find themselves in a complex position at the moment. It's not as easy as going to pick a player out of the market or even just selling a player. There are a lot of business decisions that need to take precedence, if you like, and we're just going to have to see how they move.
Mm. I guess with Mark, you've got, if we go back to the financial difference between the Conference League and the Europa League, if we keep him for another year and don't sell him, is that worth an additional 20 million to us and another trophy if he's the person that leads us to winning the Conference League and takes us into the Europa League? Is that a gamble you want to take? It would be kind of, Bloomernomics if we're going down the Brighton model, but like that's the kind of hard decision we'd have to make. But if we want to become a selling club and that's part of our model, it's also kind of antithetical to that to go down that route. So
No,
it's
I agree with you. It contradicts the middle model completely. Not selling Mark, let alone this summer. Last summer, they should have sold Mark if they were devoted to the model. But losing both centre backs in the same year doesn't really fly. But ultimately, I think you kind of need to zoom out a little bit here. And I understand Steve's conundrum because of the financial problems. However, if you want to show Oliver Glasner that you are ambitious, I think possibly the man you sell is Eberechi Eze. Take the profit there, accept the loss on Gay because he's going to be very frustrated if both goes. He's already spoken about how he's happy about the fact they've kept the squad together this summer, and he just wants to build on that a little bit more now going into the final weeks. But if you lose both Mark Gay and Eberechi Eze in the final weeks of the transfer window, that is your star talent just gone in within a click. And that's no way to show a manager ambition. And when you're trying to get him to sign a new deal at the football club after he's shown no indication that he will sign one at the moment until he sees what the squad looks like. So once again, more difficult positions, more things for Steve Parish to ponder. If I was him, this is now going into opinion rather than insight, but I would be selling Eberechi Eze this summer. I think Oliver loves Ebbs, and I think they've got a great relationship. But if you think about the Oliver Glasner system and the Oliver Glasner way, if you like, I think there's probably he is a replaceable player within that. Although he's got this unbelievable amount of quality, he's not the perfect fit for Oliver's system. If you watch him a few times, he will slow play down at times. I think in transition, the way Crystal Palace play under Oliver Glasner, you need a player who can just go. So he's not the most irreplaceable person in the system. However, I think the qualities that Mark brings, whether it's the leadership or just the outstanding nature of his defending and his brilliant ability on the ball, I just think it doesn't make sense to sell him at this point of the window. And maybe if Palace can take big profit on Eberechi, they can cut their losses on Mark Guehi.
Yeah. I mean, there was a moment in the Community Shield when Guehi put in that cross that Mateta flicked onto Sarr. No other centre back that we can buy for the money that we'd get for him can put in a ball like that. We have two centre backs who are extremely physically gifted in Richards and especially Lacroix, but you need someone better on the ball next to them to kind of balance it out, or else we struggle to get out of our defence. We'll sort of hoof it up to no one. Lacroix's passing and Richards, they were struggling to meet their targets.
I don't think Mark or Chris, sorry, I don't think Maxence or Chris had particularly good games in the Community Shield. But Mark was everywhere. He just recovered every ball, and that quality. And I mentioned it in the previous point. Just the fact he can lead a performance and just dominate a game the way he did. And it's no wonder Liverpool are interested in him the way he played in the Community Shield. I just think at this stage of the window now, when you're trying to rebuild the squad or build on the squad even, you don't want to be doing a rebuild. And if you lose both Mark Guehi and Eberechi Eze, you're kind of verging into that territory because of how vital they are as a Crystal Palace Football Club.
Right, but if Mark and Eze are so crucial, and we know from Ed Aarons' reporting that Glasner, doesn't want to lose Mark, and we wouldn't want to necessarily lose Eze, regardless of his fit for the system, why would we then sell? You mentioned financial problems earlier. Obviously, I've spoken about this on Twitter as well. What is the need for us to let these players go if we know Guehi's willing to run down his contract and Eze's not pushing for anything?
Yeah, I think with a middle tier football club like Palace, you're always looking over the financials, and this summer, especially with Palace, they're essentially paying off transfer fees from the last 3 years. There are a hell of a lot of outgoings because Palace have done a lot of business. I know to some people it doesn't feel like it, but if you look across the board, whether it was the signing of Adam Wharton, Daniel Munoz, so much business the club have done. Maxence Lacroix last summer, Eddie and Casey for £30 million. We're talking about an extraordinary amount of money for a club like Palace to be spending. Those outgoings with the way amortization works and spreading things over the course of contracts and installments, Palace have got a lot of money on the books going out this summer, and I don't think anyone could argue against that really. Um, January business doesn't help because Palace normally plan to do most of it in the summer and don't leave much for January, whereas they have done January business over the last few years as well. So there are a hell of a lot of outgoings, and for Palace to then be able to constantly do business, they need some money coming in, and that results in a sale of a marquee player. And when you're looking at Eberechi only having 2 years left on his deal and Mark Guehi only having a year left on his deal, business decisions they come to the forefront, and Palace need to be making profit on these players. Otherwise, their initial investment was essentially pointless.
So I guess the question is, why isn't Glasner understanding of our need to do that if we want to give him the squad size necessary to compete in Europe?
Because Glasner's a winner, and he doesn't see he doesn't like the fact that you're going to break up a winning squad. If you look from a pure progress point of view and take the business out of it, you've just won an FA Cup against the odds. You've now won the Community Shield. A serial winner wants to develop upon that, and you want to add top quality players to that. You don't want to take your top quality players away. It just doesn't make sense if you want to go on and compete in Europe and potentially win that competition. He's going to go all out for all four competitions this season, albeit winning the Premier League does feel a long way away for Crystal Palace Football Club. But he will fight for every competition, and for a manager like that with the standards he sets, you don't want to be losing your best player. It just doesn't make any sense. You need to add that centre back. You need to add that attacker who can play across the board. Oliver's a very clever guy. Of course, he gets the business. But this late in the window, is it business anymore, or is it you've got to do what's sensible for the on-field performance? That would be the argument of a manager, whereas the chairman would be saying we need to run this business sustainably. It's not my fault Liverpool have waited this long to come in. It's not my fault Tottenham have waited this long to come in.
But if we want to run the club sustainably, going by the profit and sustainability rules, PSR, we're well within those boundaries. So why would we need to sell to raise funds from that kind of level of
Well,
sustainability?
it's a cash flow problem, isn't it? If you've not got investors making big investment into a football club, you have to remember if there's a capital call. So say Woody Johnson wants to put £300 million into the football club, Parish has to put up his percentage of that, which equates to his ownership share. Otherwise, his share gets diluted, as would Blitzer and Harris. So there's conversations to be had around the board table about how that capital is raised and put into the club from people. I'm not for 1 minute saying Woody Johnson wants to put money into the club. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information at the moment. But maybe there's a case that Steve Parish needs to step away from his ownership role at Crystal Palace Football Club and remain chairman. So he then doesn't have the financial pressure of putting his own money into the club. But what remains to be seen is whether he would be interested in becoming an employee of the football club because Steve wants to run this football club. He still sees himself as running this football club for the next few years. But in terms of ownership and ownership structure, if you've got three billionaires on the board, how feasible is it that you have someone who, quite frankly, hasn't got the pockets to keep up with that might of investment?
I guess it's difficult because we all want Steve Parish as our owner, a fan, a man who's taken us from the brink of nothingness to two trophies, European football, the Premier League for over, well, approaching 15 years now. It's remarkable what's been achieved, and you'd love him to be there for the ride. But if you've got these three, the combined net worth of all of our owners is over 20 billion US dollars. It's a obscene amount of money, and it kind of baffles the mind. It can be really frustrating in the era of modern Premier League fees that we're not able to compete on that front. And we know it's not about PSR, it's about people sort of putting in money and are they willing to put in money? And if they did put in the money, would it disrupt the ownership structure? So it's very complex and it's so complicated. It took UEFA a couple of months to work out what they thought about it. And even then, we're not certain they've gotten that right. Like it's just very, very complicated. And I think there is a degree of responsibility that lays at the feet of the people at the top in terms of not being able to sort out the funds to back our best ever manager because it isn't a PSR issue. It's not like we're being hamstrung by the authorities on this one as well. It's very much a case of our structure, who's willing to put what in and let go of a certain amount of control. So I guess that's restrictive. But in the case, say we sell both Guehi and Eze, we then have to sign, going by what Glasner said last week, two centre backs, of maybe two forwards, potentially a midfielder, and potentially even a right wing back as well. That's six players that we'd have to get done in the next 2 weeks, which, given how we've struggled to close off windows in the past before, doesn't fill me with a huge amount of optimism. Is there anyone in mind do you think we target? Can you see us pulling that off?
Well, you're looking at an overhaul that was essentially the same size as last summer if you lose two players, which is when four players came in on deadline day. So it's worrying because that's exactly what Oliver Glasner wanted to avoid. The only thing I would say is that he had most of his squad available for pre-season this year, whereas last year there's so many players away on international duty that he didn't have much time to get his ideas across to the players. Whereas these players, as you saw at Wembley on Sunday, are very familiar with his ideas and ready for this season. However, you can caveat that with the fact that if you lose Mark Gay and Eberechi, you have just lost two players absolutely critical to
They're
everything
currently our
Crystal.
captain and our vice captain, right? In terms of
So you've lost a pure quality and leadership and people who've been around the club for a long time, and that's very difficult to replace. Not it's not even the quality that is difficult to replace as such. Quality is always replaceable, but it's actually what they bring to the football club, whether that's to the training ground or on the pitch, or the leadership qualities, or just knowing the people and being good employees of a football club, being good people. It's obviously something that Dougie has always pushed. That of course they want the greatest footballers coming to Crystal Palace at a young age, so they can develop them, nurture them, and make that profit. but they also want good people at the club, and they don't sign people unless they think they're going to contribute to the culture at the club. In terms of targets directly, it's not something I can get into too much, but you would presume they will go and look at Diamande again as a centre back. Very difficult deal to do, however, with the amount of money that would require up front. Unfortunately, I missed out on Guehi, who was a big attacking target of the football club. I think Andy Diouf is probably one to watch over the last couple of weeks of the window in midfield. I know I'm just rehashing names that you've all heard, but I do genuinely think Andy Diouf is somebody the club really admire. And if they do need the centre midfield player, which it looks like they do, if they get a bit more cash flow into the football club by a couple of sales, it could be one that they go and look at. But then again, would he be a starter? And this is something you have to review when you're going to spend around £15 million on a player like that. Um, the most important thing I think they need to do is sign an attacker, regardless of whether anyone else leaves or not, because they're going to leave themselves short in Europe. Otherwise, they need to be able to rotate that front line. They use a lot of energy with their transition play, so they're going to be some of the players who tire the most. And equally with Saar going to AFCON this season, and Steve said that this is something he's been thinking about when we interviewed him. You know, you can't lose Saar. At Wembley showed it how critical he is to the way Palace play and that pace he offers in transition. You need someone like for like who can come in and have that impact.
Yeah, I mean it's concerning to be honest, because with Nketiah's injury, we're left very light on striking options. I mean, I'm sure Edouard can probably do a job in the Conference League, but we're going to need these numbers. It doesn't feel like Glasner fully trusts Romain Esse yet. He can say he does. He doesn't play him enough for that to be the case. He subbed him off after bringing him on the last day of the season. He didn't play, obviously against Liverpool.
Yeah, and Glasner doesn't, I think you make a good point about him not being overly fond on players. And I think it's pretty clear he doesn't like Jezron Raksaki, who at the moment is a player who's going to be remaining at the football club because there have been no offers for him since the Rangers offer. Rangers have signed Mikey Moore. So which means they don't need a attacking player anymore. So where does he go from here? But you've got an attacking player there that you could use. You've got Odsonne Edouard, who I think Glasner would want to move on. But when I asked him about it in the press conference ahead of the Community Shield, he said he doesn't know whether he's going to be at the football club or not. Because frankly, he needs attacking options. And with Eddie and Nketiah injured, with potentially attackers leaving, Odsonne Edouard, albeit not the greatest player on the planet, I agree, he can do a job in the Conference League in terms of pure squad numbers. He can play across the front three, and he could be a player who ends up remaining at the football club, which feels mental considering he couldn't even get a game at relegated Leicester last season.
But isn't that what Evan Gesam would have brought to the team, is the ability to play across that front three? And we missed out on that deal because we dillied and we dallied, despite the player having interest and having our own links with Nice. Like it was a very strange way for us to go about that deal. But yet again, we simply didn't seem to have the ability to put the funds forward to make it happen as quickly as Villa could do it. And that's just something we're going to have to deal with due to having not made those sales yet. But if we're looking at players who could bolster our attack in the case that Eze leaves, we know we need someone quick in transitions. Well, the two best players at that who have been past targets of ours, say Bakayoko and Doi, they've all moved to other clubs this summer, as is Gesand, as we've already discussed. The names that otherwise come up, you've got Antonio Nusa being rehashed, but we all know about his knee injury history and the club being apprehensive on that in the past. You've got, say, Bilal El Khanous, who keeps coming up in the media, but he's not a Glasner type player. He's much more of a Eze like replacement. He's probably not ready to step into that role. He's just 21, scored 2 goals in the Premier League last season. So it doesn't really seem like we've got the pool of players in the current pool of names that we've heard that would help us get anywhere near where we need to be.
I mean, I'd be looking at Jonathan Rowe. I'm not going to get into names left, right, and centre, but he's certainly one I'd be looking at. The club aren't being forthcoming with who their targets are at the
Disappointing.
moment.
I'm kidding.
They are playing their cards very close to their chest, and I think your joke is quite apt actually, because it certainly feels like, well, who are you moving for then, if nobody? Um, we are just going to have to wait and see at this point. Hopefully, that phone rings at some point over the next few days, and we get some clear answers. But whilst I'm on holiday, that's quite difficult to find out as well. So who knows?
I guess the last factor of this is of the youth players from our academy who are yet to go out on loan who could be expected to step up. Obviously, you've got Hindelo Mustafa out with injury at the moment, but he's still quite likely to get moved on to another club. So it's maybe not him that can help bolster up the attack. We know Glasner likes to keep a thin squad for the sake of bringing in youth players and having a higher quality across the board rather than some players who never play and aren't really adding anything. And it's better to call on youth players because then you at least have some kind of pathway, as we saw with Devaney last year and moments for Caleb. Caleb's another, obviously, but as we mentioned with the pod last week, he's got his disc injury and it's hard to tell when that's going to happen. I think the final, probably what, Mofi Jemede, who doesn't seem like he's
Yeah,
going to go out on loan.
the best chance of anyone of breaking through at the moment, it
Mm.
seems. Especially if Marco's. I mean, there's a conceivable world where he'd have to play at Chelsea,
Yeah.
which just also feels another absurd thing to say.
Well, you don't think Mofi can do a job at Stamford Bridge on his debut?
It's a challenging time for the football club. Is it would be my response. I think no, look, no, you can't expect any young player who's never played a professional game in their life to come in and do a job against the world champions. It's just a mental thing to say.
Gillingham away in the pizza trophy, mate.
Oh yeah, right. I'm going to steer clear of that conversation.
Oh my God. Well, look, I know that you're pushed for time due to the time difference, and I also am committed to various other things. So I'm afraid we're gonna have to wrap this one up basically now. But if you have any further questions for our next podcast, feel free to comment them below in the YouTube channel comments, which is something I can say now. Very excited about that. But otherwise, thank you, Bobby, very much for coming on. Even though you're on holiday, a lot of people were bantering me for threatening to get you up at 5 in the morning for this, which of course we then pushed back.
Yeah, I was very close to doing the 5 in the morning because it actually probably fitted better into their schedule than this. But I wasn't. I was going to be on the naughty step if you like if I set an alarm and woke the entire house up at that time.
And every cloud is a silver lining because at least now we can react to the transfer news of the day, which I think makes this a much more.
And the statement as well, which we probably didn't touch on as much as we should have done. It was a very strong statement um, after the CAS verdict from Crystal Palace. I think they pretty much summed up exactly how the fans feel. I think it didn't really pull any punches, did it? Some blows there towards Nottingham Forest, and perhaps some informal arrangements they have with Leon. I assume is what that was alluding to within there. It was a very strong statement, and it was good to see in a sense. But equally, it's not going to solve anything now. Crystal Palace will be playing in the Conference League, and it's time to just pursue that and go all out for that competition.
And hopefully we can go on and win it. I mean, I certainly think we have a chance. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you all next time after hopefully we've beaten Chelsea at the first game of the season.